to better understand the rapidly evolving situation in the Middle East and its wider regional implications, we are now joined live from Cairo by MENA political analyst and researcher Omar Zayat. Thank you for joining us, Omar. So with Iran striking US bases in Kuwait, Bahrain and Jordan today, so how exposed do Gulf states now feel, and is there a risk they get pulled from spectators into active participants in this war?
Yes, thank you so much for hosting me on Asia One News. In terms of the Gulf positioning towards this war and also the recent strikes on Kuwait, Bahrain, and even Jordan, I think it marks like a turning point at this point for the Gulf states, because they're no longer merely just hosting the conflict; they're increasingly becoming part of its geography. For years, like the GCC has pursued what I would describe as a dual attack strategy. On one hand, they've maintained close security partnerships with the United States by hosting American military bases, and they also worked on opposing Iran's proxy expansion in the region and weakened the axis of resistance, as we've seen with Saudi Arabia and as we've seen with any involvement happening between the Gulf and Iran, either in Syria or in Yemen. On the other hand, as well, also like currently, they've invested heavily, especially during the past couple of years since 2022, in reducing tensions with Iran through diplomatic normalization, economic engagement, and regional dialogue. We've seen diplomatic channels through Pakistan, through China, but this is right now is like with the current updates on the current with the current war and the current conflict, it's under unprecedented strain, really. Uh, from Tehran's or the IRGC perspective, these military installations inside Gulf states are legitimate. They are legitimate military targets, regardless of whether the host governments actively participate in these offensive actions or not, or these offensive operations or not. And Iran sees this as effectively raising the costs of confrontation to both Washington and the Gulf economic system until it gets what it wants, or until it has the upper hand on the diplomatic table. At the same time, the Gulf governments understand that joining any kind of offensive military operations against Iran would fundamentally undermine the economic transformation strategies that they've spent years building, similar to initiatives such as Saudi Vision 2030. We Egypt also we have Egypt Vision 2030 and other similar visions around the region, either in Jordan, UAE, Bahrain, or Kuwait. And the real danger really isn't if the Gulf suddenly chooses war, because I see no possibility where that becomes their entire public stance, even if there are differences from what we see on the diplomatic forefront and what we hear behind closed doors. The danger is really that these repeated attacks gradually eliminate the political space for neutrality. Every missile that lands near an American installation inside a Gulf country increases domestic pressure to strengthen security cooperation with Washington, while simultaneously making these countries appear less neutral and less in Iran's side and in Iran's help. And like the recent Iranian strikes on U.S. Facilities in Kuwait, Bahrain, and Jordan emphasized this greatly.
And Trump says things will get really bad next week with threatened strikes on Iranian bridges and power plants as well. So from Cairo's vantage point, so is the region bracing for a genuine escalation, or is this seen as pressure tactics to force Tehran back to the table?
Yeah, from Cairo's perspective, we have been preparing for both possibilities simultaneously. There is certainly, like you said, an element of coercive diplomacy in President Trump's rhetoric, J.D. Vance's rhetoric, and the entire foreign administration, or including Marco Rubio and the entire Trump administration in the U.S. But throughout this conflict has attempted to combine overwhelming military pressure, I'm sorry, with political messaging designed to convince Tehran that continued resistance will become progressively more costly towards it. However, there's also a significant difference between threatening military facilities and threatening civilian infrastructure, such as bridges or power plants, which is what the entire U.S. agenda, or the entire U.S. agenda towards Tehran has been, or at least earlier in this conflict. Once the conflict expands to critical national infrastructure, it moves beyond military signaling and begins affecting the state's ability to function economically and administratively. And this is usually what the US has done throughout the past couple of decades. It's doing it right now in Cuba, as a fact, which shows some sort of hypocrisy, I would say. And that significantly raises the political stakes for Tehran. Our principal concern, Cairo's principal concern, is that excessive escalation diminishes the available diplomatic off-ramp. It diminishes the options for us to reach a neutral standpoint. History shows that these conflicts often become they often become the most dangerous or reach the most dangerous point when each side believes that additional military pressure will force concessions, while the other interprets those same actions as evidence that compromising or compromise has become impossible. And this is exactly what's happening with both Washington and Tehran at the moment. So from Egypt's perspective, really, this is less about predicting whether strikes will occur than understanding that the region has entered a phase where escalation itself is becoming structurally easier than de-escalation. It's becoming more costly for countries to withdraw its strongholds and Hormuz, or to forsake its future in whatever kind of economic reconstruction or economic benefit they can gain from Hormuz or any of the naval passageways, than to continue this war. And President Trump's latest warnings and continuing U.S. operations really concerns, unfortunately, for Egypt and for the Gulf states.
Heavily on the Suez Canal traffic. So if the Bab el-Mandeb and Hormuz threats materialize alongside this new round of strikes, so how worried should Cairo be about knock-on effects on Suez shipping and Egypt's own economy?
Yeah, so this is a really great question, by the way, and it is something that I myself am feeling like in or any Egyptian household. Uh, it's really one of the issues causing the greatest concern in the entirety of Egypt and in Cairo specifically. Egypt does not simply observe maritime security in the Red Sea. It depends on it economically. The Suez Canal remains one of the country's largest sources of foreign currency, and the country has only recently begun recovering from the severe disruption caused by attacks on Red Sea shipping by the Houthis and other belligerents in the region. So if both Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb come under sustained pressure simultaneously, Egypt really faces multiple challenges. Shipping companies once may again divert vessels, as we've seen a couple of months before, around the Cape of Good Hope to reduce risk. Even ships that continue transiting through the same passageways or the Suez Canal may face substantial higher insurance premiums, security costs, and delays. There is also the rise of the Brent and oil prices. This all affects not just individuals, but affects foreign currency earnings, government revenues, investor confidence, and we're also going to see the flotation and inflationary pressures over the Egyptian pound once more, and this will also affect broader macroeconomic stability. The strategic concern is that Hormuz and Bab el-Mandeb increasingly function as interconnected maritime corridors. Pressure in one corridor inevitably affects confidence in the other, and also affects the Suez Canal as a result.
Many thanks.